Hello and welcome to Cannabis TV. My name is Connor McLeod, and in this interview I get to speak with the founder of Medical Marijuana Genetics, John Green. In this interview we discuss the breeding process required to produce new cannabis varieties, medicinal cannabis in the UK, what constitutes cannabis medicine, the process of oil extraction, corporate influence in the cannabis industry, and what it means to be able to grow your own cannabis. Make sure and like and subscribe, share and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on any Cannabis TV content. You can also help to support the channel by signing up to Patreon and help to create a stronger cannabis media platform. Now then, let's talk cannabis.
There you go. Is that working?
Excellent, brilliant, man. I hear you perfectly.
Nice to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you, John. How you doing?
I can't help. I was a very big fan of the film Highlander when I was growing up, man. So
Excellent.
You already get that on a regular basis.
No, since high school, man. But I'll be honest, I'm normally the one that initiates that claim to fame.
Okay.
normally.
Yeah, I used to be upset. We didn't have much VHS when I was a kid. We had like 3 or 4 videos, and that was like the most badass one that I had.
Yeah, excellent. I'm delighted, man. What a perfect start to the interview. Do you know, actually, it was a couple of years ago I'd started a job doing like confectionery and stuff, and I showed up, it was 3 a.m, I had to start. And I showed up, and the guy that had to show me where to go, he said the same thing. He was checking my name on the timing, and he went, so what's your name? I went, Connor McLeod, and he shot his head round at me and went, no way, man. And he got his phone out, and he's showing me him with a Highlander sword, and he's up in the scenery. He was like number one, tattoos of the Highlander fucking, like, quotes and that, honestly. So yeah, I've heard that. But yeah, so how you doing, man?
I'm doing all right, man. I am. Don't want to sound cheesy, but I guess I'm just grateful for being okay, man. And being, I live in the countryside, so I live in an amazing place on the South Downs, which are these rather massive hills in Sussex, which I didn't know even existed until about last year. With a lot of woodland in most directions and a dog, so I'm like locked down. I'm pretty happy with lockdown. I have a desk here, so I can work from here, which is good. I don't have to go into the office. I can send seeds out. I can make oils and do all this kind of thing where I'm exactly at. I'm not going to give my full location now, but I'm in somewhere beautiful, so I'm happy really, and I feel blessed. You know, I think that's generally what now in this time of COVID and the time of like mass hysteria and mass fear, you can either go like that way, or you can be like, well, actually I feel fucking lucky I'm not on, you know what I mean, I can afford my next meal and got some income and those kind of things, you know. So I guess I'm on that level I'm doing really good. And then if you're feeling like that the whole time and then thinking about what is good for you, then you genuinely are going to feel better than I probably feel better than I did before all this like stuff started happening, you know. And not that away from people dying, you know, dying in hospitals and stuff, but I just mean I feel more grateful now for what the freedoms that I do have than I did before, you know.
Yeah, it's actually a really humble position, John, because in all honesty, I think we're in a situation where on a daily basis it's very easy to be depressed. You know, and that's the situation. All you can do is grab onto positivity, no matter what. And the most difficult circumstance, you know, it doesn't matter what difficult circumstance you're in. There's always a positive direction that you can take. So I fully agree, man. That's a brilliant start to the interview. Just for anybody that's unaware of your situation, John, when it comes to medical marijuana genetics, you started as a Facebook group in 2014, and then
So I started in. My mother basically, we started a Facebook group. My mother got cancer in 2013, pancreatic cancer. I was a real mummy's boy, like youngest of 5, like, you know, obviously loved my mum. And so I began like, well, what the fuck, you know, we need to start looking as one makes it for someone you know gets cancer and someone in the family, then you look at all the alternative options, you know. And I used pot and stuff, so I was open to using it as a recreational drug. I didn't really have any ideas of the medical side of it, but at the time we started giving my mum 1-to-1 CBD rich butter, which we'd grown from some genetics made by CBD Crew, which at the time were just the main guys that did CBD seeds basically. And my friend had been coincidentally growing this stuff, and then, you know, he'd made lots of canna butter with the trim. And that was what we gave it to her, and she immediately just responded really well to it. and you know, she had pancreatic cancer, which is a pretty full-on cancer, but yeah, it was difficult, because then it was useful to her, and so we immediately started getting better appetite, and it helped with the pain and stuff, you know. And at the time, I was then helping about 2 or 3 people, so we're like, right, we need to start a Facebook group and start raising awareness to the medicinal properties, because I was like, I want other people to, to be using this. And so it just started as a Facebook group, and that was what now is like Medical Marijuana UK, and we still have a good interaction, and that's still really like as a group, that's I try and main that as I have that as my main goal, as my main aim, which is just to raise awareness to the medical properties of cannabis plant.
Yeah. I've actually came across your medical marijuana website, where it has obviously doesn't sell any seeds on it, but it has all the information. In all honesty, so much information, it was nauseating. Like, it's fantastic, man. It's really fantastic. Like, one of the archives you have, has maybe 2 or 3 dozen medical conditions, and each have hundreds of reports, which clarify the medical efficiency of cannabis. You know, so I mean, is that something you're going to maintain in the near future? Because it's
yeah,
fantastic.
actually, we have after a very, very long wait, the website is going under a rebuild and a reformation to make a lot of that information more easily accessible, and push things like the research library to the forefront. And just, we're having a bit of a change around on the website. So in the next few weeks, expect to see a new revised Medical Marijuana UK website. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm delighted to hear that.
No worries. And I'm glad it's been a very good response for you, because that really was our goal, was just to raise awareness, because we're not saying, having my mother died of cancer, from while using cannabis. We're not going around saying cannabis is going to cure everything, or it can do everything. Although I've seen some pretty remarkable stuff, and we can talk about that further on. That's all we can do, is really raise awareness and keep that goal rising. And although there's a lot of money now in sort of medical cannabis industry, and I hope we can discuss that in further on. But yeah, sorry, far away. Next question.
I was just going to say the exact same thing. It's like the medical marijuana situation the evidence is continuously growing. One of the most recent reports you put up on the website was the efficiency through apoptosis, cellular death, which is, I think that particular study was one of the American research institutes, which highlights exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting when one starts to, the evidence really is always going to be preclinical and anecdotal and stuff. But I mean, in terms of my journey, it started very quickly. I became very quickly aware of seeing my mother being on a lot of Orvisol, a lot of liquid morphine, on everything that the doctors could prescribe her, for being in like agony with like tumors already wrapped around her liver and spleen and stuff, to just not being in pain, and it wasn't like a few weeks. It was like fucking. Sorry, excuse my language.
No, sorry, man. If you've heard any of the content, it's continuous, so you're all right.
It was like an hour, it was like within an hour or two, she got her appetite. In my belief, she then had an extra 6 months, kind of did all the things she wanted to do, went on a last holiday with all the family, like rode a horse. But she went from being like on complete dependency on morphine and effectively, opiates, to not being so dependent on them. She did see a bit of apoptosis, but unfortunately, and it's difficult to know really, the combination of the chemo and the cancer, it didn't eventually work, and like most people with pancreatic cancer, she passed away. And I think that was an important lesson for me to learn, that a lot of people will start shrinking tumors with cannabis oil. They'll start providing cannabis oil, and they're like, oh my god, my dad shrunk his tumors. And then they start celebrating, and they start thinking their dad's never going to die. And then they get almost like can get a bit of a god complex, because you think, like, fuck, I think it's discovered the answer. Yeah, and then tragically, like, maybe the dad suddenly 6 months later, the brain cancer goes boom, and it suddenly spreads everywhere in his body, which we have seen as well. Which means we should be more research, and should be more information out there for people to know what's useful. but yeah, that's the thing. We can talk about the genetics as well, which I think was your first question.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say. Your first strain was Candida. Is that the right way to pronounce
Yeah,
that?
Candida. That was my mum's name, and we did. I wasn't quite aware how well known it was as a venereal disease as a name for that, so it kind of became Candida CD1, which is more sort of scientific thing. Yeah, and that was. I mean, it was pretty incredible how we did that. I mean, we at the time I was getting some cannabis from the cannabis oil from my friend Mikel in the mountains in Pamplona in Spain, and we were sort of making oil, and he was already sort of part of my mum's journey, and then between me and Nicole we decided like what we became aware of is that while I was really happy with the UK scene, and I mean Scotland and that, wherever you want to be independent or not, but I mean what I was just happy about within England and Scotland and everywhere on the island is that people were really learning really quickly, and people were making cannabis oil, and people were getting better, and they were performing over, even if it's just like doing fat infusions, which again we can talk about, I think is very important and very easy to do. And so that was already happening, but the problem was, and I was obviously making a lot of oil as well, was I was getting a lot of messages, and one message in particular was from someone a friend of a friend I know from sort of party DJing days, whose son had advanced myeloid leukemia and was in Great Ormond Street Hospital, and they were like, "Oh, we want some of the cannabis. We've heard about this." And I was like, "Well, I just can't. I don't have the type of cannabis to give you because I've only really got high THC oil, and I had some 1-to-1 oil, but even then, I'm not comfortable. I can't give that level of THC to a child, So that was where I started looking at, what was going on in the States, and I had a girlfriend in LA at the time, which was handy. So I spent a lot of time in Los Angeles and visiting dispensaries and stuff. And what became really, sort of quickly available is that in dispensaries in America, there were lots of clones from the strain Cannatonic, and lots of clones more clones that were out there and growing, and different people had them, but it was offering 20-to-1 ratio, and most of them are around 10-15% CBD with like around 1 or 2 THC. And that's what the Stanley brothers, renamed as Charlotte's Web, and we've managed to start growing Colorado or derivatives of that. And I brought some of that back from a friend before the one with leukemia, friends with a kid with epilepsy, and just some oil I bought in a dispensary, just like, try this out. And it just worked. The kid just stopped having seizures for 7 days. So that was when I was like, right, well, I obviously can't be, buying oil in America and sending it back.
Yeah.
We need to try and, provide access. And then CBD Crew at the time, really incredible seedbank. Big up CBD Crew if you ever watched this. They had a strain called CBD Crew Therapy that was supposedly not quite stable, but still sometimes being able to offer under 1% THC level, which certainly means it got effective not effective, but it just means it's safe to give to a kid. You're okay doing that. And so that's what we began to look and work for, and within the space of 2 years, we had found a clone found a clone from seed that was under 1% THC and 18% CBD, then successfully managed to breed it in the mountains in Pamplona, all within one breeding cycle, the product of which was the first candidates, CD1s, which were all tested and all came out at under 1% THC and up to 20% CBD. And that really, in my opinion, in terms of genetics and almost what's available now, influenced all high CBD genetics, because it suddenly made it possible for people to access 20-to-1 around the world with that seed, and we made a further 7 strains in our first breeding op. And normally, like with breeding it, you're looking at maybe it's going to take, sometimes it takes 5 years, sometimes it takes 10 years, you're crossing phenos. A lot of the time it doesn't work, or most of the time you cross it and you get your varieties have too much, like different levels of THC.
Yeah.
And then it's obviously not stable and not safe to be given to people. So yeah, that was our main product. We then entered the cannabis, the Cannabis Cup in Spain, and we managed to win in total over 3 years. We've won 7 Cannabis Cups, all for CBD characters, and then we used the Canada as our mother, and then all our future genetics have come from that. And we do take a high CBD cultivar like Canada, and we take Sour Kush Diesel, one example, cross those, and then you're getting like a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1 ratio, sometimes getting a 3-to-1 ratio. And so we launched medical marijuana genetics in beginning of 2017 as a brand new seed bank with just our test results, and pretty much opened up the way forward for, certainly in Switzerland we sold a lot, with a lot of their, they were allowed under 1% CBD. But then more importantly, we gave a lot out to places like in South America where they've got, basically they're allowed to make oil. It's effectively decriminalized. In places like Colombia where you can go 20 plants, one person, so that they get 20 people growing 20 plants, and then suddenly they've got like cannabis clubs that's providing 20-to-1 oil to kids basically. And that's that was the story of Canada. So it was sort of like out of my mum dying of cancer and writing a letter saying this is what I'm supposed to do in a Facebook group, and a lot of kind of like effort, we managed to launch that seed bank, man, which is good.
Yeah, it's actually like resetting some of the stuff, man, like that you've been doing. It seems like a relatively short period of time to be so successful.
It is a very short period of time to be successful, I guess, but I guess it's, I think, I mean, when we knew that Canada was special was just we do a lot of it's grown out. We grow a lot in Spain, undisclosed locations, out in the wild, and so we grow sun-grown stuff, and then basically, it makes fat infusions from that in the same way they're doing in South America, and I've had great success with those fat infusions, although albeit most of the time they're illegal preparations, or they've been brought into the country illegally or made illegally. But yeah, that's what I think. So my belief is that sun-grown medicine and fat infusions, which is the most ancient way of making cannabis extracts, are some of the best ways to experience, or to get the beneficial properties of that cannabis strain. And then also if you're decarbing some of it and not decarbing all of it, you can then get like this full plant profile with CBDA and CBD in. But yeah, it seems to have been successful. Canada, and Canada is, it's an offshoot of the genetic variety Cannatonic that's been successful already in Colorado and America. So it's not like we did anything new. I think it was more like we just got very, very lucky, and I do obviously believe a lot in intention and like manifesting stuff. We got very lucky and managed to do it in kind of one round of breeding, and then I think the cups proved for themselves really that my partner and breeder I work with, Seve in the mountains, they sort of speak for themselves, but it's like I want more people to be growing it. I think that the difficult situation in England now is that we've got a lot of parents that are reliant on specific oils that have been working well for their children. In my opinion, most of these are whole plant oils. Like Bedrolite seems to be the most popular one.
Yeah.
That we Murray Gray is on from Scotland in Edinburgh. Karen Gray's son, and now it looks to be fucked because of Brexit. So while it's not like I'd encourage any of these people or tell any of these people to grow their own medicine, but I just do believe it's possible to get the same properties and in a safe and effective way from growing your own cannabis. I really do believe that.
Sorry, the situation, I was going to say that the situation at the moment, it seems extremely dire, in all honesty, because it does seem like the only direction to have consistent medicine on a regular basis is to grow your own. Brexit has been a recent issue, but the issue prior to that was funding, just to get this stuff over here in the first place. And the issue before that was another bureaucratic issue, and it's just continuous wave.
A lot of issues but it is, a lot of these children, there's pediatric cases where there's a lot of monitoring their situation, so they are very worried about you know, trying untested preparations or growing their own. And also sort of the more worrying thing is, if you look in New York recently, there was a large article which I could forward to you, which exposed that the main 25 license holders had been active in basically trying to stop legislation that would allow people to grow their own 6 plants at home.
Why so?
Because they're the 5 license holders of the, you know, of the people that are selling the product. So they don't want
People to be independent.
to grow their own medicine. And I sadly, I think there's a similar narrative and rhetoric that within from the medical cannabis industry and world specifically, that you can quite easily pick apart in some of the videos and some of the lobbying groups, is that they will not support that. And further to that, they'll also tell parents that it's very dangerous to be growing your own cannabis because you can get mold and pesticides. And admittedly, I would say it is dangerous to take something untested off someone you don't know. But if you grow a plant outside or in a greenhouse, and then hanging up to dry for 2 weeks, it's very, very difficult to get moldy condition. If you're growing stuff that it's indoors and you're pumping sort of, you know, like sort of light and humidity and stuff like that, then, you know, maybe the chances increase. But even then, we still have access to testing in this country. So, you know, I don't know. I think we need full legalization, and then people can still get these oils that they're paying like 15, you know, £2,000 a month for like less than, you know, I think it's something like 3,000 milligrams. It almost costs you £1 a milligram.
Yeah, that's
it's crazy.
Yeah, it's like
what
actually.
Do you think? Going on a bit as well.
No, not at all. This is the direction, man. This is how these things work. It's good. I like this. It's a lot easier to be a good interviewer if the person's articulate, this is handy. But yeah, I think the situation when a lot of people have said that it's dangerous to grow your own medicine, the ratio's inconsistent, and obviously not the analysis is not deep enough. That's one of the things I think you can get like private labs where you can send off like food and other products. So why I don't understand why this isn't a position that's more enforced.
You very much can do that. Yeah, there is testing facilities in the UK. There's testing facilities in Spain. And I think you know, you know, we know a lot of parents that already are doing this, but, you know, they obviously can't be public for obvious reasons that their kids can get social services. But I think, you know, it's difficult in this situation that lots of people can get angry and impassioned with cannabis, and, you know, and a lot of and me included, have almost been sometimes overstepped the mark with some of these parents when I'm only really trying to further conversation. And it's more like asking you a question is like, you know, what is the genetic makeup of this oil that's working so well for your kids, you know? And it comes a problem when you've got sort of like the groups within the medical cannabis industry, and I'd love to talk about the irony of kind of how that's weird, how that the medical cannabis just as a concept hits a brick wall when you try and put it into, you know, make it into medicine, and we get to this impasse that we're in now.
Yeah.
I just think it's important that the discussions continued, you know, and the conversations continued, and people do know that. I don't think it's really going to happen until, you know, sort of videos are actually made of growing 20-to-1 stuff, making oil, then giving it to a kid and getting it tested. And I think that's really kind of the next level of what we're doing. There's so many different voices now, and you have groups like IPS, you know, IPS Grow Pharma, which is the sort of, you know, ex JP Morgan bankers, like, and ex sort of UPA employees, you know, suddenly trying to capitalize on this medicine, and they're going, hey, we've got a lab in the UK and we'll mix up and make your oil.
Yeah.
And they don't, you know, they don't have particular genetics. They're talking about like, we'll take some isolates and we'll do that for you. And that, again, I think puts his parents under more pressure, you know. But it's a fine line, you know what I mean? If there was something that was saving your life, and for the first time in the history of like man, we knew we would be able to know what that thing is, and also pretty sure be able to replicate it.
Yeah. Why
don't we do it? You know, and it's not like, you know, Bedrock and the company have plainly stated to parents that we know that the company, you know, that the products aren't identical each time. And we know that because there's no random controlled trials for them, even though they've been out for 6 years.
Yeah.
Their Bedrock oil is around 9% CBD and 1% THC, or 0.9 THC. Sorry, 0.4 or 5 THC, coming in at 20-to-1. And then and that works, but it's still not the same every time. Even if they're using the same clone, you know, one fractal of light might alter one minor cannabinoid stuff. But I think what the dangerous narrative is maybe that and now a lot of these parents saying, look, if we switch cannabis medicine, our child could die. Yeah. And that, you know, it's a dangerous game you're playing when, you know, because cannabis has never caused any deaths in the history of its use. Yeah. So I generally don't believe that switching cannabis oil can cause death, you know, and I think that's it is. I don't know. What do you think about it? There is a fine line between, you know, certainly companies and then mothers, you know, being used slightly for the purpose of promoting only this one type of thing, you know. Yeah. Whereas if you go to America or Colorado or California, it's open and everyone can be growing and making their own thing as long as it's lab tested before you buy the product. So you've got a much better system over there, basically.
Yeah, in all honesty, I'm extremely pessimistic about this entire circumstance, including the UK in particular. The way, the direction that it's taken, the slow process, the seemingly, it's going to come across bad, but the propaganda element that seems to be present when children are being used, in particular, to maintain a fearful perspective, and that's what it seems to be. The initial position seems to be, when the thing you're talking about transitioning over from medicine, first and foremost, the rhetoric through official narratives seems to be children are needing to be safe. Obviously, this is true. They need to be careful. You have children, so let's take our position first. And that's obviously a legitimate position to take. The difficulty comes in is that the position that they're giving you seems to be something that you could be easily acquired yourself through your own cultivation and stuff like this. Yeah. The process of the profile identification when it comes to cannabinoids in particular, again, the lab testing, it would take a relatively small period of time to establish a locally run community-based situation if everybody got together. And I think that's the collectivity is important when it comes to cannabis in particular. And I think that's where the fear comes in, that they say death is the only consequence if you stray away from our medicine. I'm not saying I'm not saying that we don't need official positions where you can acquire these medicines. Obviously, this is just the way society is made up. But the basis of cannabis in particular, you kind of briefly touched on it there, about the complexity of it, and medically in particular. And it seems to be that there's this tight grip on cannabis, initially beginning with the medical side. And I mean, recreational cannabis never gets touched and never gets even spoken about anywhere, really, in the UK in particular. So, and the thing that bugs me that it seems to be a strategic basis on why cannabis has been held back medically in the law. I mean, the reality is, even in the pharmacopoeia that was constructed in I think it was the beginning of the 20th century, or 19th century, they openly stated that cannabis is extremely efficient for chronic pain. And yet you fast forward to nowadays, and even NICE's guidelines state that cannabis is relatively inefficient for chronic pain. That's an indicator. You know, that is an indicator of that there's either an impressive level of ignorance going on, or there's a strategic placement going on here through corporate interests. And that's, again, people start flagging up conspiracy theories and all that, but the legitimacy is, this is the way it is. This is the way, I mean, the writing's on the wall. There's enough information.
You're right to touch on that, but that, you know, it's been going on for a very long time, you know. And I mean, I don't know how long you've been doing this. I guess I've been involved in the sort of campaigning or kind of looking at it from a different angle since 2014, you know, or 2013 almost, almost 6, 7 years now. And again, I'm pessimistic in terms of, you know, even, you know, we legalized medical cannabis in 2018, and I think there's been less than 3,000 prescriptions, you know, and they're all private prescriptions, and, you know, and then, you know, the irony of that is you've got doctors who had no previous experience in cannabis, and there isn't much real clinical data on cannabis. There's incredible preclinical data and you know, of its medical properties, but actual like hard data that can move it forward isn't there, you know. So, you know, you have all these clinics offering, and well, we think you should try this, and they you know, they've got a year's experience of giving out the certain types of weed to people to know what's working for them. But you know what I mean? Are they any more experienced than me or you in terms of providing cannabis medicine? Probably not. You know. But I think, I don't know. While one would be pessimistic about the legality and the fucking, sorry, excuse my language, the irony of, like, you know, us being the biggest exporters of medical cannabis.
Yeah.
You know, I think one has to be hopeful and be proud of all the stuff that is going on. Like, people are aware of medical properties. People have been making oil that I know for like 5 years, and clubs and compassion clubs making oil, and kids getting better and all stuff, you know. And then, you know, we have seeds that we've been giving out and provide to anyone wanting to grow for epilepsy. I also would love to send you some free seeds.
Yeah, I'm all right with that, man. Definitely.
And to hand out to people in Scotland. We've been doing that, you know, for some time, you know, and as long as people know that and have got access to that, then I guess that sits okay with me, you know. And I think that's, you know, that's where it's interesting for me is you know, because I can't provide medicine for all these people. Integro clinics can't provide medicine for all these people, and you know, at the moment the conditions are pretty limited. If you've got a child on epilepsy, you may be able to get some of this medication. There's been some improvement from the Epilepsy Society, and you know, like there's sort of, you know, obviously there's all this press cases and stuff like that. It's still very difficult to get through your hospital board, your GP, like whoever's in charge of, you know, the hospital trusts that are, you know, firing off against liability.
Yeah.
You know, all of that kind of stuff. You know, or like you mentioned earlier, all these different steps to get through. You know, and people are like, well, what's the answer? You know, and I've sat there on different people's, you know, feeds on Instagram, commenting on like Alfie's Hope or other ones, going, is this now, you know, is now the time for discussion about the possibilities of alternative routes of access, you know?
Yeah.
And I've been saying that for like 3 years, and they're like, no, and it's immediately dismissed. It's like, no, we don't want to know about grow your own. It's very dangerous. Our kids are dangerous. You shouldn't talk about kids because you don't. And it's suddenly like, well, you know, sad that it is for all these, you know, the 20,000 kids with epilepsy, drug-resistant epilepsy in the UK, and 60,000, you know, there's still, you know what I mean? There's more than that childhood cancer, you know.
Yeah.
See what I mean? They don't have access to it. So how can we, you know, like, how can we provide access to those? And for me, that's really through raising awareness and through sharing genetics, you know. And certainly that's not something that medical cannabis companies or Bedrockan are into doing.
Yeah.
You know, they've trademarked their brands of oils that are working for kids with epilepsy, and they don't want anyone to be able to share that, which is, you know, in the history of cannabis and the way cannabis has been used, not really, you know, we have the ability to be able to, anyone can grow cannabis. You can grow cannabis anywhere, and you can, you know, there might be lots of different names for, lots of different names for strains of cannabis, but there aren't really that many different, you know, different varieties. There are different ways you can prepare them, but if you're talking a whole plant, like high CBD, low THC variety, the genetic profiles and makeups are not very different, you know.
Yeah.
So that's my opinion on that, but I think it's fairly common, that well known about that.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of that, in terms of medical cannabis in the UK, like, you know, the only actual cannabis medicines, in my opinion, are made by GW Pharmaceuticals,
Right.
and they're made with isolates. They're a pharmaceutical grade standard, and they have like 8 years of random controlled trials and double blind trials to show their efficacy. And that, you know, like you know, people are anti-GW. I'm not. GW have done some incredible research. All the other ones, like Bedrockan's oils and you know, Israeli companies' oils or grow farmers. There's about sort of 3 or 4 different oils you can get in the UK now. They, you know, they don't have the history or the experience, and their products aren't identical every time, you know.
Yeah.
And their tinctures, which sort of come in like that size bottles, with the same kind of labels that tell you how many milligrams of cannabinoids are in them, you know, are costing 6 times what you might be able to, you know, buy it from someone else, or you know, 200 times what it costs to grow the electricity and make it yourself, you know.
Yeah.
So, but I think, I don't know, I don't think one needs to despair. I think there's a lot of stuff going on outside of the media where people are raising awareness and growing plants, making oil and getting better. And as long as that happens, like whenever that happens in local communities, it spreads like wildfire. I'm sure you've seen when you see someone like, oh my God, you know about, you know, Bob down the road who's taken some oil and he's shrunk that. It suddenly becomes like, well, that's great. And then Bob's mates want to know about it. And then, you know, and it normally, in terms of the way I've seen it, all the people I know that are sort of caregivers and stuff, it all starts at home. It starts with someone and you love, getting better, and then you're like, bloody hell, I wanted more people to get better.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we want, and we are. There's a lot of good science and good data that shows that skunk or high THC cannabis has been present in cases of people with psychosis. Now, I wouldn't say it's good data, because the main Wayne Hall study is done with people with Afro-Caribbean origin in the center of Brixton, where cannabis use is obviously, culturally rife,
Yeah.
so they didn't really compare it to other drugs, but there still is data. And I've got 6 nephews. Now, that's a lot of the reasons why we made other strains of CBD and THC, as well as 6 of my nephews, if they're going to smoke weed when they were they're now in their 20s, so they can kind of do what the fuck they like. But when they're 15, 16, asking me about ganja, I wouldn't be like, hey, let's get you some amnesia, or let's get you some lemonade. I would be like, yeah, if you want to smoke ganja, come and get some off me. Here is some Moroccan, some Moroccan standard, or here's some Thai weed, and then you've got some cannabis with CBD and THC, and then it's, we've made that little thing anyway. So I'm aware that I talk a lot, so I don't want to keep on. I'm interested in what your questions and your opinion, but I know I can go off on one a bit.
No, at all, John. In all honesty, you're actually totally knocking out the park a lot of my questions here, so it's fine. It's just like the ball is rolling, and it just saves me asking, man. It's brilliant. Because that thing you mentioned as well about the grow your own in particular, one of the things that's definitely been a benefit through obviously children receiving medicine is that the parents have become more inquisitive about cannabis in general, and then that's had a ripple effect into the community and into the families. And again, like you just perfectly mentioned, that the basis of the medicine and the knowledge of the medicine starts at home. So again, it just comes to that same thing of, if you can grow your own, you maintain autonomy over your ability to heal yourself. And I do think that if we had a much more available standardized process where you can go to a lab locally, like I mentioned before, that would help spur this on a lot. I also think as well that the same medical establishments that are proclaiming that only our medicine's efficient, like you again perfectly mentioned, it's not consistent. They're not getting a consistent ratio. There might be a fractional difference in the cannabinoid profile, but that's still a difference. And the same thing, if you're going to the same lab or the same analysis facility, the difference in your product to a mainstream pharmaceutical grade product will be negligible, really, because you're going to the same facility to understand your medicine. And if you had the same process, like you mentioned as well, of somebody actually, like stage 1, you grow your plant, germination, all the way through to the extraction process, again, that gives an outline to what's required. It's almost, sometimes I think to myself, this is, if you couldn't acquire oranges, the body needs vitamin C, you eventually would be able to do some form of in-house process where you can acquire that yourself, and that's what the grown is, that's what the element is, because your body requires it.
But the sort of the parents is an interesting article from Cannabis Health News, which I think is maybe affiliated with a lot of medical cannabis funding or something, because they seem to never talk about genetics or any kind of growing. There's an article yesterday where Dr. Callie Seaman is talking about how not one medicine, it's not one size fits all. Again, it's very dangerous to change your bedrolite, and then it's like, well, show me the research that shows that other cannabinoids are also dangerous, But I think, I don't know. I've gone, posting till I'm blue in the face, but then people very much like, oh, well, you're part of the grow your own, and it's like I just not really a part of grow your own, and I'm not really bothered. I'm not really bothered about. I mean, I do care about the legality of recreational cannabis, but I've been able to get cannabis for for 25 years. I don't know anyone in any part of the country who has difficulty really, apart from actually a couple of my friends in Scotland. We could talk about that afterwards. That have difficulty acquiring, cannabis varieties.
I don't know what their problem is, John.
I think, I think, you know what I mean? Like growing your own, you can actually get more consistency than bedrocking. Bedrocking, maybe they're cloning a plant, which they've got the clone off, which proved successful, and then they're growing in a warehouse where you've got lots of different air pockets and places. If you're growing in a small tent and you've got 6 tent, you're just controlling a much smaller environment to actually control.
Yeah,
might result in a variation, but certainly, like in terms of genetic profiles, like out of 500 tests from Candida CD1, like that wasn't it wasn't a fully stable strain. So some strains you get more indica dom, and would be more like 10% CBD and 0.5 THC, and then other ones would be 21% CBD and 1.1 THC. But the ratio was always identical, So it's that even with those seeds, that was an unstable seed, and we do Queen's Candida CBDs are much more stable. But even with C1, we were able to see that the ratio was proving consistent. And then by sending these seeds out to foundations like the Fundaluba Foundation in Canada and Aberachi one in Brazil, people were using the same seed, same ratio, and using it safe and effectively with kids. And it's like, we don't know really what is working in that medicine for kids. In my belief, it's much more to do with the endocannabinoid system, rebuilding itself cellularly, in terms of these all the multiple conditions that seem to be, something that we have both probably seen with people we know helped by cannabis, whether it's like arthritis, whether it's, cancer shrinkage, or whether it's childhood seizures dropping over. All of those just show a system that seems to be fueled when it's using by cannabis. And we're a long way from understanding that science yet, and it's, obviously what we know with kids is that these high CBD cultivars with low THC seem to be effective. And what we also know is that whole plant medicines are more effective than isolate medicines, and that, so I'm kind of repeating the same points, I think.
No, I fully agree, John, and I think that's one of the things that's completely understated with anybody that's just been introduced to cannabis. There is a multivariate perspective that has to be adjusted to, and it's you're dealing with multivariate on the basis of the endocannabinoid system is multivariate. You're dealing with like physiological functions, you're dealing with genetic susceptibility to endocannabinoid system deficiency, proposed by, I think, Ethan Russell at the Institute of Cannabinoid Research, which was almost 20 years ago, I think maybe slightly more than that. And then again, you're dealing with
1991, like
1991,
30 years ago.
30 years, exactly.
Full legalization across the whole world when that happened.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been almost 30 years and we're still in this caveman dynamic. One of the things I was wondering though is like, because I've not done any form of international travel regarding any form of cannabis activity. So it's like the grow your own, the dichotomy between medical cannabis and recreational, and this demonization of the grow your own movement, as you mentioned, is that present everywhere, or is that just a UK phenomenon?
No, man, it is. Well, I think there's two things that are present in the UK. The psychosis thing, is really prevalent in the UK.
Yeah,
and
just for anybody that's wondering when they say
is you can see that when money is and corporate interests are involved, and sadly you can see that. And I'll send you the article afterwards. Are in New York licensee holders. There's like 25 individual, license holders and monopoly holders in New York State,
right?
And they're all been busted as coming out, basically putting out this unheralded, basically propaganda that growing your thing it can be very dangerous, And then they take what they do, the irony of that as well is they then take a load of really shitty products from across the board that people are, making in warehouses in California or something, and going, hey, look, this weed's got mold in it. That means growing your own is very dangerous. Whereas if you're growing your own in a small environment, if you're growing plants in a greenhouse, it's just a plant, And so I think really that, and it's again like Hannah Deacon posted, there's another news article yesterday about this stop of bedrock, and it is tragic. I think it's pretty tragic that these kids can't get exactly that medicine, and they should have, an open and free market where there's multiple licensed holders being able to supply the same medication or similar medications, and then the price comes down.
Perfectly.
So,
you just perfectly said that there, John. So do you think that that's what's needed then? Do you think this year COVID has absolutely destroyed the economy? Do you think cannabis needs to be rolled out essentially immediately? And then obviously on a medical basis, that means these kids will be able to receive their medicine regularly, so it'll be created at home.
Like the GW monopoly is in patent till 2023.
Right.
So the GW have got a license to be the sole distributors of cannabis medicine within the UK, and at the moment, the way they're getting through that is we're sending in these specials, and with a lot of pressure. But yeah, I think it's I've been trying to say this question for many years. Like, what about poor children? What about children who are in council estates? What about children who can't afford, to spend £2 a month? Where's their cannabis medicine? This system of medical cannabis. You look at Australia, right? Australia legalized 2016, and they are in exactly the same position. Same companies, Tilray, Aurora, Israeli. I can't remember the name of the Israeli one. Tikkun, although I think Tikkun might have been shut a bit. They've got the monopoly, and they're like, hey, no, this cannabis is safe, and that cannabis is not safe.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of our recent thing, is just trying to show what safe and effective mean. If you have access to testing facilities, what's the biochemical difference? And this is a very interesting question. And I have put this to almost every single medical cannabis page, and I've almost been blocked and banned from most of them, which is what is the biochemical difference between medical cannabis in inverted commas and using cannabis medicinally?
Yeah.
And there is a difference. Like most of the flowers that are being offered through Bedrockin are skunk flowers. There's stuff that and I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm anti-skunk, but I'm not. I believe in the history of cannabis, where you've always got CBD present in land races, and the THC is a bit lower. Yeah. And I feel like, personally myself, if I'm using cannabis recreationally, I still will smoke probably. I will smoke in a pipe with no tobacco, some amnesia haze, but in the same way that a dude drinks a whiskey in the evening, to get out of it.
I'm perfect that you said whiskey, actually, there, because this is one of the things that, again, keeps popping to mind when it comes to producing your own cannabis and cultivating it. You have the same format with alcohol, that you have these multinational corporations who produce alcohol, make it readily available to the public, but you're also allowed to create alcohol yourself in your house. And again, if you do it incorrectly, it can be dangerous. But they don't, and again, you're still consuming it, you're ingesting it into your body. So I think, again, the narrative, I constantly say this in the channel, where language seems to be the tool that's used to maintain this prohibition. It's not a safety circumstance, because more victims have been present because of illegitimate enforcement of cannabis prohibition. People's families have been destroyed, and their health as a consequence, depression, mental illnesses, just on the basis of having to wait for your court date, months in advance. I think I had the guy on the channel this week.
For the court date, I know.
No, exactly. It's like Martin Condon, that was on the channel earlier this week. He had described it, and he lives in Ireland, and he got lifted with a joint, and he had to wait 11 months to go to his court date. And it was like, that's 11 months for a joint. And anybody that is not in a position of confidence with what they're doing, like when it comes to cannabis, they might spend their whole time feeling like a criminal and feeling panicked and anxiety and all these health consequences.
It's pretty. I mean, have you been to America before? Or have you been anywhere where cannabis is legal?
No. I've been to Amsterdam.
I've been to. I mean, Amsterdam is cool, but it's like,
it's still inefficient. It seems extremely inefficient.
When you get a card in California, it's now actually it's fully legal, but beforehand you'd get a medical card, like ring up, do a conference like this, and they'd be like, right, get your card, and then with that card they give you a certificate, and you're allowed to carry up to 9 ounces in your vehicle.
Yeah, that sounds like a good weekend.
My relationship, or sort of feeling towards police, completely changed. Because my only issue. The only issue I have with police in this country is cannabis,
Yeah.
And maybe there's some cannabis in my car. I've been stopped with oils in my car. But we'll continue to make and provide medical cannabis oil, a lot of the time for free, sometimes and seized people to want to grow that. And I think that narrative is important to grow. I mean, like, what's interesting, you mentioned the words just now, the language, and specifically what Grow Pharma and some of the other, if you go into Integro clinics, you just go into any of the sort of 5 cannabis clinics offering, cannabis advice, is they also never refer to it as cannabis. They call it all cannabis medicines, right. And then you're talking about stuff that can change every time. It's just like, that's a cannabis medicine. That's cannabis oil that I've made myself.
Yeah.
And I'll, provide that to someone with most likely most people with cancer is what I deal with. And what's the difference between that and what these guys are providing? I think that's probably actually going to be better, for this whole plant, and it's made by myself. But illicit is the other word they seem to be very popular now. So that is illicit cannabis.
Yeah.
It has 1,000 milligrams of CBD and THC in a whole plant sublingual tincture. And I
Good
believe
man.
that over the 5 years, I believe, happy to send you some of that. I believe, you know, that's the best form to administer medicine. It's around 3% cannabinoids. I don't think you need more than that. I've made that myself. And that should be absorbed for sublingual administration. I believe everyone, you know, I mean, that's another thing I'd sort of would try and it's like people need to be more aware of making cannabis oil with using lipid fats.
Right.
Because, you know, you can make isopropyl oil in a rice cooker. We've all done that, but that is actually dangerous and it is flammable. And, you know, in my opinion, anecdotally, and I'd say this, I'm not a doctor, but anecdotal evidence that we've seen is that, you know, sun-grown flowers extracted in fat infusions, extracting the whole plant profile and maybe cooking it for like 12 hours, sometimes 24 hours. I've seen positive results from people using it as well in a way that's non-psychoactive. You know, because most people I speak to, you know, it started off with my mum and then 3 or 4 other people. It's all people with cancer and stuff, but it's all people. Most of the time, it's 90% of people who never use cannabis, don't want a psychoactive effect, and you know, you need to. I don't know. So sublingual is the best way, I think, really, and you can just get them used to a dose and then.
Yeah.
Lower. What about other questions on terms of cannabis?
And well, I was actually going to ask, because you're on topic for that. What is could you just give a brief process from start to finish of how you actually make your oils for anybody that's curious?
Yeah, so making oils really grow the plant in the sun, you know, from May to September, preferably in a greenhouse. You know, in Spain, he doesn't really need a greenhouse. I mean, in England, we've been pretty lucky with the summers. I don't want to comment on the Scottish weather, but I would say maybe a greenhouse might be useful in Scotland, or a plastic polypanel. Grow plant one in full cycle. Dry plant for 2 weeks, hanging upside down. Dry and trim plant by chopping off the leaves and trim. But you keep, when you're making medicine, you keep everything. And then, yeah, and I'll happily I can post a recipe on when you post this online. So we've got a good one on the website.
Yeah, that'd be
so
perfect.
dry plants, cure plants, then. And this depends on the person, but I believe it's good to decarboxylate half the material. Most people will decarboxylate all of their material. Decarboxylation, as Jeff Ditchfield hammered into me a long time ago, 120 degrees for 120 minutes. So that's very easy to remember. That's 120 degrees Celsius for 120 minutes. Yeah. I myself personally like to decarb half or 2/3 of the material that I'm going to then make into oil. And do that in a oven. And then that's just because I don't know whether the CBDA or the THCA is more useful. And we've done interviews with people that have got better from arthritis just from juicing cannabis, and then other people that are like, oh, we don't, you know, it's not enough to break the blood-brain barrier. So I think it's important to have both. So decarb half or 2/3 of the material, 120 degrees for 120 minutes, and then using any type of lipid fat. MCT oil is very expensive, but I think that's almost the best. But I've always been very confident using decent olive oil, and it's worth spending, if you're making a lot of medicine, it's worth spending like the 30-40 quid and getting like the primo, you know, organic or cold pressed or just quality olive oil, you know, not the stuff, not if you can help it, not, you know, go get good olive oil basically. And then large pot, basically cook that weed in olive oil at a low heat, gas mark 1, don't exceed it more than 45 degrees Celsius. And then if you are doing this on a regular basis, probably a good idea to get a digital thermometer, because then you can just check any heat spots, check it's not going too high. And then basically slow cook that cannabis for a minimum of 6 hours. If you've got the time and you're locked down at the moment and you don't have to leave the home, or you've got an Argo or a stove, then do it for 24 or 36 hours just to make sure you're extracting the full profile. And you're literally just stirring and heating that cannabis. And when you're stirring that whole plant, that type of plant, whatever type of plant you're using, the fat will extract the entire plant profile off the plant material. You know, it's not missing out a metabolite, it's taking everything out of it. And that's the way for thousands of years people have cooked cannabis. And then, in the last final step, get a good pair of tights, thin tights or muslin cloth, and pour through a muslin cloth. And just pour the liquid through a muslin cloth at the end of it. And if you've got strength or someone strong in the house, really squeeze the mulch, as it's called, squeeze that muslin cloth tight. If you're going to do this on a more regular basis, a homemade apple press for 30 quid is really good. Then you put the sack of mulch in the bottom and you can really pressure out, squeeze any last drops of fat from that material. And then you've made basically a whole plant cannabis oil tincture, you know? And if you want an interesting story to round it off, the first time I did that in Spain 4 years ago. And it was with the first crop that we'd made, the first ever candida seeds. We had like 20 or 30 plants left over once we've got the seeds out, and we did the same. We followed that process, decarb 2/3 of it, decarb half of it, undecarb, and cooked it in a large pot with biodynamic organic olive oil that we got from a local farmer, and this is all in the Basque Mountains. And I made it for someone in particular. Earlier on in this interview, I was talking about a friend of mine that I knew from the party days, that son was lying in Great Ormond Street Hospital with active myeloid leukemia. Yeah. Which, if you know about leukemia, it's not a particularly, it's not a great leukemia to have. Not that any leukemia is good to have, but I mean, and if you're in Great Ormond Street Hospital, that you're in a difficult position already. And she, this mother was just in despair. She didn't know what to do. She couldn't get any cannabis, and I was trying to be like, well, look, you need to take the kid to Los Angeles, and then you can get some stuff here. And the kid, you can see him on Instagram. I'll send you anything else. He was like a bone, he was like made of bone, like no hair, no nothing, full human. So I brought that olive oil, and I hadn't tested the olive oil. It wasn't a tested medicine. It was literally olive oil that I'd cooked, dried cannabis flower that had been grown outside in. Yeah. Nothing, no like special preparation or some keen wizardry that someone's claiming is doing different to get hold of medicine. And I brought that medicine and I gave that oil to that mother, and in 6 little bottles like that to start off with, outside in a restaurant in Great Ormond Street Hospital. And she was already in despair. I got a call 2 weeks later, and she said, please, 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 whatever it is, don't run out of that oil. My son is now eating, he is now sleeping, and he is now gaining weight. Thank you. And so I went to see that mother, and I dropped off, and I gave her a litre of the 10 litres that I had smuggled and brought back. Not smuggled, I brought that stuff back into this country. I wouldn't say smuggled, but I don't think there's anything illegal in what I'm doing. Yeah. And I believe that it's my right in my country to make cannabis oil and provide that to anyone that I see fit. Yeah. And until the NHS are doing that, until people are properly doing that, we don't really have any choice not to do that. And so if anything came out of this interview and anyone watching this, all I would say to them is, you can grow your own varieties. You can grow varieties that are safe for children, and you can extract the whole plant profile, as people have done for thousands of years before, just by cooking it in fat and getting a pair of tights. And you can make enough medicine for 500. You can make enough medicine from one plant, from a single seed. You can make the same amount of medicine. I've calculated the milligrams that one of these kids is getting for 6 months and paying upwards of £15,000 for, and that's obviously a message that I'll keep on trying to share, and a conversation I'll keep on trying to raise and ask questions. It's not my right to tell anyone what to do. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying people should go and grow their own, and like some of these aggressive cannabis heads, you need to make your own, do it, and it's like, no. Yeah. You do what you like for your bloody child. It's nothing to do with what I'm. I don't have anything. I'm not a parent. I have no idea what it's like to go through these things. But what I do want these people to know, that there is a possibility that they can gain the same therapeutic potential from a plant that's grown at home as they can from the medicine that they're buying from there. And it's not dangerous. And there are varieties of cannabis that are safe and effective. We are happy to provide any of these seeds to any parents for free that wish to grow cannabis oil for their children. And we've done that, and we'll continue to do that long after, all these I don't know, the industry is settled, and we don't have much of a part in the medical cannabis world, and we don't get invited to the conferences, even though we know the people that started them and were there at the beginning speaking to them about the medical properties of cannabis, you know, because they don't want genetics or seed banks or the knowledge that we can all be doing this, you know, because that's at the heart of real prohibition. That's kind of why they, you know, why they almost illegalized it in the first place, you know.
Yeah.
But that's another story of conversation. Have we got enough here? Is there anything else you want to ask me?
No, John, that was brilliant, man. And the reality is, it's very difficult to stigmatise yourself or anybody doing the exact same thing when it comes to you're sending out free medicine to people that need it. The conversation on grow your own really is like a smoke screen, because there really shouldn't be a conversation. Some people would choose not to, that's fine, but the option should be there anyway. And the idea that people should be criminalized for engaging with something that's exclusively for attempting to help a health circumstance, that should be legitimate, which draws questions on the establishment and the mainstream, the fact that this is something that's frowned upon. I'm aware that obviously there's the standard rhetoric that's behind, you know, safety and all these things, but as it's been seen, more people are experiencing harm through prohibition and their inability to grow your own than being rewarded for that.
So that's right across the board, but the way out of that is just medical use, growing varieties that have got CBD in, and changing the, you know, for me, it's always really been about changing the mentality of someone that's like, I consume cannabis like that for my own pleasure for many years before I realized that you could do it like that, make oil, and then suddenly like people can get, you know what I mean? People can, you know, and my mother, for example, can come back from like being wrapped up like that in agony with like taking 50 milligrams of fucking Orvisol to try and stop the pain, and then being constipated from the heroin. You know, like it very quickly she became dependent on, you know, it's a very quick path if you're in chronic pain to opiate dependency and to drug dependency, and that's what's on offer. And it is, you know, it is a conspiracy. But the point is, like one of the conspiracies going on at the moment, if one notices a conspiracy, there's not much point in exposing it. The point is, it's just like, let's raise awareness to the fact that there are other routes of access, you know. And it's nuts that you know, I've been trying to talk to Hannah Deacon or those people for almost 2 years, and there is some engagement on Facebook, you know, but I don't know. I hope these people get their medicine. I really do. I hope they get what they want, and it's their right as people in, you know, in a private system to be able to pay what bloody medicine that works for them. But they also need to realize that we need full legal, you know, if you had decriminalization, you can have those really expensive tailor-made medicines, but you can also have me or you growing something legally, and if you have access to testing, there is no risk. And then people do have access to testing. But there we go. I think I've touched on all the main points already in the conversation so far.
Yeah, you certainly have, John. It's been really enjoyable, this, actually. I do think, just before we get going, that this current situation with Brexit has certainly drawn a much more a brighter light on the conversation of what role cannabis should be playing in the UK, because the Brexit's not going to be stabilised in the next few months. Even by the end of the year, if there was any form of legitimate progress, I think everybody will be relieved. So we have an extreme level of urgency towards this topic. You know, we have children such as Hannah Deacon's son, and others that are in a situation. And I think the thing that should be mentioned as well is it's not just children. We're dealing with millions of adults that are in a situation that require medicine as well. And I think that it's just the spotlight does get shone on children because that is the priority, which, and rightly so.
Well, it's the most obvious like proof of efficacy. You know, is like kids having seizures is not having seizures. You know. We've gone from 150 seizures a day to 150 thing, but then you know, the question you then ask is like, how can poor people access this? You know, all these poor parents that are trying to fund their Bedrocan prescription, you know, and then they're being told by Bedrocan or by other companies that it's really dangerous to switch oils, and they shouldn't, you know. And it's kind of like, I don't disagree with that, you know, in terms of when I'm dealing with patients or people that are using cannabis medicinally. When something's working for them or something doesn't work that I've tried, then I say, well, let's not try that. You know, if something's working, let's stick to what's working, you know. And I can understand if you suddenly had years of seizures and suddenly not having it, that's that. But then it's like, then just next week, well, what is it that's working, you know? Let's have a look at the genetic profiles and see if it's similar to stuff that's being used in South America, like where they've got thousands of people that are accessing it, and there's no companies that, the companies aren't set up yet in Colombia or Brazil. They've got it all through decriminalization and small foundations, where they've got small cannabis clubs making the oil, providing it to kids getting better, and then it's just like, we're not going to stop that, and I don't know. So I think it's just look around the world. Australia, look at that. Australia has medical cannabis, and again, it's all that is a monopoly. England has medical cannabis, and it's a small monopoly. Generally in our monopoly, it seems to be like white owned corporate companies. Some of them are ex-investment bankers, invading a bit of the community cannabis scene, nicking up sort of reps from patient organizations, and then suddenly going, hey, we understand cannabis medicine, come to us. Don't try that, and don't try the wording that really upsets me is the fact they refer to illicit cannabis as to anything that's not their cannabis,
Yeah, exactly.
And it's that's demonization, and what they're actually effectively doing is they're putting that parent off who can't afford to get one of their medicines, that might be thinking about going, hey, listen to their cousin Jack. Hey, buddy, you might be able to, can you grow me a couple of medical plants within that, 18 plant grow that you've got going for you and your mates? Yeah. And can you make some oil? Can we get that lab tested and try it with my kid? Like where it's like that. But that is happening. And as long as we're still talking and like awareness is being raised, I just think that needs to be, it's very difficult with parents I've worked with, because obviously they don't want to go public, because then they can have their kid taken away from social services,
Yeah.
But I think it's just like you say, it's just conversations and raising awareness to possibilities. It's like, like you said, there are all these stumbling blocks. First, it was the money that's stopping it. Then it's the Brexit block. You know what I mean? Then it's the thing, and it's like, what does that prove? That it's quite dangerous, And they like in this recent article in Cannabis Health News, where it's like, you can't just change ketchup. And it's like, well, like you say, if you need vitamin C and you want to grow the oranges, suddenly we can't get any oranges into Spain, in from Spain, it's like you would start growing lemons,
Yeah, exactly.
But there we go. I don't know. It's not as bad as it seems. Like, people are, I know incredible women in Scotland who I sent seeds to now 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm also always interested in sending more seeds to Scotland, because I don't have much representation up there. So if I could, I'd love to send you like loads of seeds you could then pass on to other people who wanted to grow for medical use.
I have absolutely no doubt that many of my friends that are watching this will be absolutely delighted to hear that. I'm sure that'll be the case, because I have actually got a couple of friends. When you mentioned excellent, that sounds brilliant, John. When you mentioned it,
I can provide you with 20 to 1. The 1-to-1s you probably have to buy, but I have a lot of free 20 to 1s to give.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking, because I have a friend, when you mentioned earlier about particular medical conditions that respond well to CBD-based medicine. I have a friend whose parent has Parkinson's, and one of the things that's been noticed is that she has a dramatic decrease in negative symptoms when she uses CBD oil. She also smokes, essentially, which would be referred to recreationally during the day, through the lens of people that are critical, but because she enjoys it. But again, that also provides relief, because when she doesn't have anything, when she can't get it, obviously, because the only option is black market material, if you can't get it through local sources, she goes into a state of degeneration very quickly. So she's crunched up, and her memory becomes extremely impaired. Her cognition is the thing that responds most. And again, people will say this is anecdotal, but there is actually evidence to suggest that the amyloid plaques, which seem to build up on particular receptors relating to Parkinson's, become disintegrated in a sense through cannabis use, and also I think the other consequence, the element that causes Parkinson's is something called a degeneration in the nigrostriatal group population of cells in the brain, and I think cannabis again contributes towards, as long as I'm not mistaken, it contributes towards a positive reduction in that symptom. So it's very difficult to pretend like this isn't legitimate evidence just because the standard narrative is this is anecdotal. And again, that's another language technique that's used regularly. Anecdotal evidence. It's like, even though it's patient admitted,
I mean, the stuff that I've seen. Yeah, I've seen a kid come out of Great Ormond Street Hospital that was going to die. That was the first thing I saw. I've seen kids have their seizures stopped. I've seen, people with, like my mum, had to go from cancer diagnosis to come fully back to, having like life and stuff. So it's all really there, the point is just raise awareness to that, and grow more weed, grow more seeds, make more oil. That's the thing. It's like, it's teaching people who are growing 20 plants of Ammo Kush that instead of sort of turning their trim into shatter, they can turn it into an olive oil based tincture, and then use it for the local community. Because that's what my friend, how I got into that was my friend had literally, he liked cannabis, but he didn't like high THC stuff, and that's all he could get. And so he managed to find CBD crew seeds from Seedsman, and then he grew this 1-to-1 strain, and with the leaves of that, he made some butter, which was the thing that helped my mum, and so I think that it's more like that, and self-sufficiency, and then kind of to ignore the noise of the companies going, hey, don't worry about the illicit cannabis. And I've seen them. Some of my former friends and colleagues, like my esteemed colleague Alex Fraser, who now works for Grow Pharma, supplying cannabis medicines to through the NHS and stuff like that.
I think actually, sorry, I was going to say, if Alex is watching this, Alex, expect an email soon, because I was intending on getting in contact soon. So that's perfect you said that, John.
There's Alex is my esteemed colleague from UPA days. I shared a stage with him in 2014. But they're of the opinion now that that sort of medical cannabis they're providing is medicine, and the stuff that you're smoking or using is not medicine, and that's just a bit, I don't know, for us that's a bit insanity, because they're also saying they can pharmaceuticalize the doses, and sure, you can isolate make a fine. I can pharmaceuticalize a dose if I make using isolates, but I tend not to use isolates, But that's another issue and another story for another day. I think some people will see it like, well, look, it's got to start somewhere, so we advance the cannabis medicines first, and then that again maybe provides further data. But I think when you separate medical cannabis from cannabis, you're leading yourself into a dead-end argument, which actually limits access, because it should be all cannabis is decriminalized. In California, you can buy medicinal cannabis from a shop, but you also have the right to grow 6 plants. In Colombia, you will be able to buy the medical cannabis from a shop once they've grown it and it's made, and that's kind of going on with licenses at the moment. But at the moment, you can grow 20 plants, per person. That's enough. Like with 10 people, that's enough of these, and then they form all these collectives in Colombia where they're all growing medicinal strains. A lot of them are using Candida CD1, and all making medicines for the local community. And I think that's the real shift in change in the UK. And that becomes more about society and about what should I be doing for my neighbours? You know what I mean? But that's another argument altogether.
I think Uruguay has a similar situation where you can grow. I think it's up to maybe 10 or 20 plants. But if you grow up to 90 plants, you have to then administer that to a pharmaceutical enterprise. But again, you're still maintaining the control, because you're the one that's producing the stuff, and you're the one. So whoever gets this medicine inevitably will be will be assured from that. But just before we go, John, anybody that's want any obviously of your seeds, you can find it on seedsman.com or .co.uk or .com. Either way, I'll find it, put it in the description.
Well, medical marijuana genetics, our seeds can be bought on seedsman.com as our main distributor. But if you're a parent who wants to contact us in strict confidence to grow for the purpose of treating childhood epilepsy, you will get free seeds. And I'll also send some free sample seeds for you and local communities in Scotland, because I've done that all around the world, and I feel Scotland doesn't have enough representation for seeds from me personally.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, John. On the behalf of everybody in Scotland that's going to receive that, thank you very much. Appreciate that, man.
Peace and love.
Excellent.
Thank you very much for talking to me. It's been really interesting, and I look forward to meeting you in the future.
Thanks to John for giving me his time, and thanks to you for sticking around until the end of the video. I sincerely hope you enjoyed the content. I'll see you next time.